Your breath freezes before it clears your lips. You can feel it happen, a thin fog crystallizing in the space between your face and the dark. Your fingers, wrapped around a spear shaft you shaped yourself, have gone past cold into something closer to numb. Somewhere behind you, in the dark of the shelter, a child is crying, and quietly, urgently, someone is trying to hush them. Sound travels strangely in weather like this. For roughly 400,000 years, across an entire continent locked in ice, this was not a crisis. This was simply what Tuesday felt like. You are a Neanderthal. Forget the hunched, low-browed brute from the old textbook illustrations. Your brain is, on average, slightly larger than a modern human's. Your body is compact and powerful, built low to the ground, thick through the chest and forearms, engineered over hundreds of thousands of years to hold heat in a world that is constantly, patiently trying to take it from you. This is Ice Age Europe, and the cold here isn't just weather. It's a predator with no face and infinite patience. Glaciers grind slowly across the north. The tundra runs unbroken for 1,000 miles. And you have absolutely no way of knowing that in a few thousand years, your entire species will be gone. But that isn't today's problem. Today's problem, like every day's problem, is simpler and more immediate. You need to eat, and the ice does not care whether you succeed. You wake before full light, inside a shelter built from stacked mammoth bone and stretched, oiled hide, its walls groaning faintly against a wind that never fully stops. There's no fire yet, only ash and the memory of warmth. Someone has to coax the embers back to life, breath by careful breath, and this morning it happens to be you. The cold bites into your lungs on the first real breath outside. Is today a hunting day, or a scavenging day? That single answer will decide whether tonight is comfortable or dangerous. Here's what most people get wrong immediately: Neanderthals weren't scraps and leftovers scavengers trailing behind real predators. Researchers analyzing the chemical composition of Neanderthal bones, in work associated with paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkaus, found nitrogen isotope signatures nearly identical to wolves and hyenas, the apex carnivores of Ice Age Europe. Isotopes are chemical traces locked into bone by what you actually ate over years, not a guess, a signature. And that signature says you weren't scavenging beside the top predators of this world. You were one of them. That single fact explains something else, something written directly into Neanderthal skeletons: the injuries. Fracture patterns concentrated in the skull, the neck, the upper arms and ribs, patterns researchers have compared to modern rodeo athletes. Not injuries from falling. Injuries from getting close. Your hunting method isn't standing back and throwing a spear from a safe distance. It's moving in on a woolly rhinoceros, a bison, sometimes a cave bear, and driving a thrusting spear into it by hand, at a range where one mistake, one badly timed step, can end you instantly. Every hunt is a bet placed against your own body, and you have already lost that bet before, which is why half the adults around you carry old, healed fractures like a second language written on their bones. So picture the day fully. You leave the shelter as the light is only just beginning to gray the horizon, moving with a group of perhaps 15 to 20 people. This is not a fraction of your social world. This is the whole of it. Every person you have ever spoken to, ever relied on, ever lost someone to grief over, is walking in this small group beside you right now. There is no village over the next hill. There is no larger tribe waiting somewhere safer. This is everyone. You track a reindeer herd through fresh snow, reading signs an untrained eye would walk straight past, a snapped twig at an unnatural angle, a faint depression where the frost sits differently, dropping still faintly warm to the touch. Communication is sparse and economical, a hand signal, a glance, maybe a single low word. Nobody wastes breath in air this cold. When the herd is finally found, the group spreads out in a formation that looks almost rehearsed, because it is. Archaeological sites across France and Germany have produced tool kits so specialized and so consistent across generations that they point to something closer to inherited technique than individual improvisation. You didn't invent this method alone in some flash of insight. Someone older taught you, the way someone older taught them, stretching backward through more human generations than you could ever count. The kill itself, when it comes, is fast, close, and violent. And then the real labor begins, butchering an animal in temperatures that can numb exposed skin within minutes, working quickly because wolves and hyenas can smell blood on the wind almost as fast as you can. Every scrap of meat matters. An adult Neanderthal living through a climate like this may need well over 3,000 calories a day just to stay warm and functional, nearly double what a modern office worker burns sitting at a desk. Winter here isn't a season you simply get through. It's a debt that resets every morning, and failing to pay it isn't inconvenient. It's fatal. And here is where the story stops matching the old stereotype entirely. For decades, Neanderthals were framed as evolution's rough draft, all muscle, no meaning, a species defined purely by brute survival. Then, in the 2000s, archaeologist João Zilho and his colleagues excavated sites in Spain and uncovered pierced marine shells stained with pigment, dated to roughly 50,000 years ago, before modern humans had even reached that part of the world. Someone drilled those shells by hand. Someone chose that specific color. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal skeleton was recovered surrounded by unusually high concentrations of ancient flower pollen, an early and much debated hint that the dead may have been deliberately honored, not merely abandoned. Researchers still argue over exactly what that pollen means. But the wider pattern holds regardless: bodies positioned with apparent care, objects decorated with no survival function at all. Why would a species locked in a daily fight against starvation and frostbite spend precious time and energy on jewelry, or on ritual? Maybe because staying alive was never only about calories. At night, everyone returns to the fire, and this is the part modern audiences tend to underestimate the most. Fire wasn't simply warmth. It was the only real safety that existed in a world without locked doors, and it was the literal center of every social bond you had. You sit shoulder to shoulder in a space barely large enough for the group, sharing meat, sharing warmth, sharing the specific, bone-deep exhaustion that comes from surviving a day where one wrong step meant death. Someone tends to a wound with practiced hands. Someone else finally quiets the crying child, now asleep against a shoulder. There is a closeness in this fire-lit circle that a modern apartment, with its separate rooms and distant, unfamiliar neighbors, has no real equivalent for. Now for the twist that reframes this entire scene. In 2010, geneticist Svante Pääbo and his team successfully sequenced the Neanderthal genome, and the result rewrote the ending of this story. Neanderthals did not simply lose a survival contest and vanish. They interbred, repeatedly, with the modern humans migrating into their territory. Most people alive today with non-African ancestry carry somewhere between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA, inherited fragments tied to skin tone, hair texture, immune response, even how some individuals process pain and tolerate cold. You didn't disappear from the human story. You were folded into it. So the Neanderthal crouched by that fire isn't a failed side branch standing apart from human history, quietly waiting to be forgotten. In a measurable, literal sense, a small piece of that person is sitting inside the body of whoever is watching this right now. Consider what that actually means. Every time an immune system flags an unfamiliar threat using a gene variant traced back to Neanderthal ancestors, that's this world, still active, 50,000 years later. Every time someone tolerates a cold morning slightly better than the person beside them, that trait may trace directly back to bodies built for exactly the world you just walked through, tundra, ice, and a fire that had to be rebuilt by hand, every single night, or the cold would win. You spend your entire existence solving one problem, over and over, without pause: stay warm, stay fed, stay together. No apps. No thermostat humming quietly in another room. No pantry stocked behind a door you never think twice about. Just a fire, a small group of people who make up your entire world, and the relentless, physical labor of simply not dying today. And somehow, in the middle of all of that, you still found room for a shell necklace. For a burial. For something that looks unmistakably like grief, and just as unmistakably like love. Tonight, when you raise the temperature in your home without a second thought, or wrap yourself in a blanket that cost you no effort at all to make. Remember what that same fight for warmth used to cost. Your breath used to freeze before it ever cleared your lips. And somewhere in your genes, quietly, invisibly, it still remembers exactly what that felt like.